I'll call the meeting to order. It's 7:01, and the meeting. Sorry. Required public notice of the meeting at this time and place has been given, and a quorum is present. So I declare the meeting duly constituted. Our first order of business is adoption of the agenda for the meeting. Proposed late items have been provided to council, and I see there are some on-table items which we will review right now prior to me asking if we want to see them, which I've not missed here. What are these, Peter?
So item 9B, or labeled 9B, is the usual resolution that we do for the annual report in terms of council declaring that it shall be determined sufficient to advertise the annual report in the village update as opposed to a local paper for 2 consecutive weeks. We propose to put it in the village update for 3 consecutive weeks, but...
Okay, fine, we'll debate the merits of it later, but okay, so everybody understands what that one, and then the other one is late correspondence, so pretty uncontroversial potential ads. So those are obviously on the table for adding. Anybody else for adds to the agenda, or removes, for that matter? Going once, twice, and 3 times? I had nothing. Peter? Yeah? No?
Just that.
Just that? Okay, so as amended, I'll need a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That carries. So that's the agenda. Public participation. Susan, are you intending to publicly participate?
No, I'm not.
Oh, you're just here? That's great, thanks. There's no delegations, and so we need to approve minutes of prior meetings. There's only one, and that is the draft minutes on page 7. I've got 1 or 2 small niceties what I would like to appear in the final public record, but I'll let anybody else take a kick.
Just
Ron?
as a question, Mayor, on some of the stuff that I would like to have into unfinished business, would you prefer that I brought it up at unfinished business?
Let's do it in matters arising.
Matters arising?
Because I note that they're all marked here. This item shall be moved to a follow-up action list. So it's all there, and we just want to do the housekeeping that it is all there.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so let's do that when it comes. Anybody else? I've just got a few, so just bear with me. These are more for presentation purposes. So item number 4, the public delegation of the development opportunity to Calvin Grove. I would like to say that the Studio One Architecture Inc. have been hired by the owners to make absolutely certain that there's no implication that anything to do with council. This is a private party coming to make a proposition. It was a privately owned land.
Hired by the owners too.
Or hired by the
owners?
owners.
Hired by the property owners?
Yeah, by the property owners, even better. Oh, and above, I'd also like to say, in case we get any jurisprudence experts, that the 10 minutes was extended by council resolution.
Mm-hmm.
And again, for similar reasons, right at the bottom, a geotechnical engineer has been retained by the owners.
Sorry, where? Very bottom?
Third line from the bottom, yeah. Third printed line. For the same reason.
Yep.
And
So what was that change?
Second to last line, geotechnical engineer has been retained by the property owners.
By the property owners to address the
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah.
yeah, just so that there's no suggestion that it's anything to do with council or the municipality. Okay, and then on page 12 of the package, that the previous resolution to purchase the shower, not motion.
Mhm.
Where?
Top line. Previous resolution. Page 12 of the package.
Oh, not the previous, instead of motion.
Yeah. And on the next page, NI advised council that they are in a holding pattern and are waiting for a report. I don't even actually know what that means.
Where?
Where it says PWM Jaffa advised council.
Oh.
What is that?
That's with respect to repair or not repair.
of the Harvey tank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not council that's in the holding pattern.
Advised council that, yeah,
That
that,
AECom.
That's,
that
That
we.
AECOM is in a holding
No,
pattern.
sorry,
we.
Should be
Staff?
we
That-
are
that
in a
we are
holding
in-
pattern.
Oh, okay, fine, fine. Okay, so we are in a
Staff.
holding pattern for disposition on Harvey tank. Because somebody reading this is not, unless they go back to the tape, they're not going to know what that means.
So a report from
No,
AECOM
fair enough, something like that.
regarding Harvey tank options. Okay, so we are, report from AECOM, a report from AECOM regarding Harvey tank options, which is expected to have.
And then the only other item was item 12, new business. That doesn't read right. None of it read right. I mean, the thing was that following my discussion at TransLink, it was noted that the 259, it's actually the 257, was not being discontinued, just changing operating companies. That's not what that note says. So perhaps I can send some suggested text, or would you like to hear it now,
I think
Council?
we've got to hear it now.
Okay, so the mayor noted that following discussion at TransLink, the rumor of the 259 bus being cancelled was in fact that it will only continue under a different operator. Now, as you probably, well, maybe you didn't notice the minutia in the village update, when I ran that text by TransLink, they said it was never actually the 259 at all, it was the 257, which, as you know, is the bus that goes from Horseshoe Bay via Park Royal downtown. That is actually the bus changing operator. So even this is not strictly correct, but that's what happened in the meeting.
And so the motion that was moved and seconded should say, continues to Horseshoe Bay 257, plus verbal report
No,
being
because
received.
the report was the 259. As it turns out, it wasn't even about the 259, but we didn't know that at the time. It was only once I fact checked with Translink. As far as the public is concerned, they know this is the correct bus. So the motion is correct. It's just the report we received. That's all I had. Thanks for your forbearance. Okay, so any others? Last chance? Okay, so motion to approve these minutes as amended. Thanks. And a second. All in favor? And opposed? That carries. So let's move on now to business arising. Ron, I know you had some.
Thank you very much. Just one second. And really, I'm taking these from the regular minutes, and it's primarily currently on pages 10 and 11 of 160. And I propose that a number of these go on the unfinished business. So currently on the agenda, we've got the bottom one being number 51, which is Lions Bay Beach Park. I would suggest that, and ask, if everybody's agreement that we go to number 52, and that would be the traffic delineator posts. And I would certainly, that'd be my piece and CAO's to resolve that. But I think it's, as it's pointed out, it's high priority. I'd like to see it in the unfinished business until it is finished.
Specifically as opposed to an IRR.
It's sitting, I mean, the IRRs are not eye-friendly, if I can say that in the nicest way. And
Well,
this way,
eye-friendly or not, that's where things go to sleep. So if we
not so it's not when it's on the first page of the regular meeting. So if that would be number 52. Number 53 would be the former IRR number 218, police auxiliaries. And this was the CAO to ask bylaw enforcement officer to contact Squamish RCMP for details from parents and bring back a report to council. So I think that's a piece that we're very interested in. So that would be number 53.
Sorry, if I can interject for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest that many of these are very interesting, some more so than others. but we're not gonna put all of them on the follow-up action list on the front of the agenda. So picking and choosing which ones are moved is kind of, I don't know, it just seems to me like an exercise in an exercise without parameters. You know, what's going to distinguish moving one thing from another thing? Should it be something that has a budget attached to it? What if it doesn't?
I'm
I don't know.
prepared to.
There's all kinds of different things that can enter into the consideration.
I'm usually the one that puts it forward as unfinished business, so in my particular case, I mean, I think we've been dealing with some of these things on the IRR for a long, long time, and quite frankly, the IRR lists are so long and we don't get to it very often. A quick piece at the front, while it may clutter the agenda, I think some of these items are actually fairly important.
Yeah,
So-
I'm sort of with Peter on this one, because what actually distinguishes, because if we're going by that, I'd like to have all the IRRs in unfinished business, please. So I think we just need to let this one sit on the table for a while. I think Peter's probably hit on it, if it's got a budget attached to it.
That was just spitballing an idea.
But yeah, but let's come up, why don't you do this?
Well, I tell you what, I'll go with this flow, but I mean, of the number that I have here, these are, that one was probably I think the first one I mentioned was highlighted as being important, so let's make it important. Some of the other ones, I'll buy into this scenario here, and I'll be quiet about it, but the last one I have, which I think is important, is also the road closure, the Kelvin Grove sale of the asset piece. It's recorded here as in process in our regular minutes, it's recorded in a camera. It's a significant piece for us, and I'd like to see that one in.
Yeah, I would suggest that if it's discussed as an agenda item rather than an IRR specifically, certainly this is where it would appear. So that is one of them.
So I would count that one as number 53 then. And so let's call it sale of road closure Kelvin Grove, and then it can be filled in as, report and update to come as it does.
Yeah, I mean, that was the subject of a report in the regular agenda.
It was actually on the closed, is where we discussed it last time.
Okay, well, maybe it goes into the closed follow-up.
Well, there was no
It was-
need, as it
we've
turned
also
out, for it
reported
to
out.
be enclosed, but
Okay, well, we moved it out by reporting it out, didn't we?
It's on page 16 of the
Yeah.
reported out, so.
okay. I think I also laid out what that process looks like and what steps need to be done. But certainly we can move it.
Yeah, this is business arising from the minutes. This is not a punch list or a task list or a project list. This is specific to the minutes.
I would suggest that from the unfinished business, in my personal view, these are items that council views are of the highest priority of the things that are unfinished.
Is this is the follow-up actions?
I think that it was said, right, discussed, it was properly put into context earlier in the meeting. These are parking lot issues. They are not gonna drive anything. They are important to council. However, the answer or the resolution of this isn't readily available at this point in time, and therefore we will deal with it diligently as we can through our term. But the thing is that for us to keep moving this stuff around, it doesn't make any sense. If we look at it and go to it and get rid of stuff because it's done, take it off, it's done, it's gone. I agree with that.
You don't mean parking lot as in the literal parking lot?
No.
Parked
But
issue.
Just, it's an issue that's parked,
Okay.
so that we know it's there, we know we've got a list to deal with, and when we get time, we go back, or when the urgency arises that we need to do it, we do it. But we're not gonna use this to drive our council meetings all the way forward all the time. It's there, we know it's there, and I think that's it. I don't think we should be doing this right now. I think we need to deal with this stuff in a manner. I don't disagree with Ron bringing it up. At the same time, I think we shouldn't be regurgitating it every meeting.
Okay, well, right now, some of the things that Ron's mentioning are nowhere. So they need to be somewhere. Whether we relegate them to the place where ideas go to sleep, That's IRRs, by the way. Or here, I don't mind, because I do know that we need an understanding of that they're on a list somewhere.
I guess the question is whether or not council is of the view that a particular matter is of sufficient importance that you want to have a verbal update on it every meeting by putting it on this fuel. That's the long and
That
short
sure
of it.
makes sense.
So I think Councillor McLaughlin has suggested that he views these items that he's brought up as sufficiently important that he wants to hear about them or about our progress on them each meeting. And
That's really
I
the
guess-
thread of it, Peter, thank you.
Yep.
And I think I'd be judicious in putting other ones forward in the future.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
And they're flagged here, and so they should be on there.
Thank
So would we be prepared to say that all the items that are noted in italics in the previous minutes, this item to be moved to follow-up action list? Are we okay with doing all of those? I mean, we can put them on the list, and when they're done, we can knock them off. I think there's about 3 of them, right? 3 or 4? Ron?
I believe I already asked.
I think what Peter was suggesting is the 2 that I'd mentioned, which was the traffic delineator posts and also the sale of road closure. I'd be fine with just having those on the unfinished business, and we'll leave the rest in the IRS.
The rest into IRRs? Okay, fine.
I mean, public safety, kind of a big deal. $1 million asset sale, kind of a big deal.
Sure. And I mean, I would almost suggest, I think you and I need to talk, Peter, about what qualifies something to go on this list, and it could be that it's on a critical path. Without it being done, everything else gets held up. I thought there was controversy. Too bad.
Movement in the force.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so let's do that. How do we move on from this? Resolution to do so, or
sure, just a motion that 52 and 53 be added as traffic delineator posts in Kelvin Grove lot sale from IRR list to the follow-up action items list.
So motion to.
okay? So that's been motioned and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favour? Opposed? Carried. Okay, thanks. Good. So now let's move on to the next item, which is in fact the follow-up action item. So we'll just nip through these quickly. Nothing happening on 32, although I do need to proceed on that one. There was another fairly major rescue last Sunday. This one was lost hikers that had gone up above the snow line in tennis shoes, found themselves on the edge of the snowfield, slipped halfway down, decided to call before they slipped over the cliff that was at the end of the snowfield, which is probably good for them. Put a helicopter, pilot, and 6 rescuers at some kind of risk. They had to long line in, they had to rappel down, they had to secure the people, they had to drag them out. They were completely ill-equipped. Whether a trails policy does anything about that, I don't know, but we need to get all those stakeholders, I don't like using that term, but this is in this case, they are stakeholders and we need to get them together. But I think the ball's there in my court, right? All right, I'll put it in my court.
Well, I'm not sure we're going to pitch this ball, given what you just said.
Yeah, well, maybe it is. Sorry, we want no part of it.
Might I suggest that next Tuesday at our meeting, we go over proposed terms of reference?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the answer may be, now, we obviously have no right to close the backcountry, but, or do we attempt an education campaign? Saying, you know, if you're wearing tennis shoes, you may as well...
Yeah, this isn't what this item is, though.
No, I know, but it's all part and parcel of the same thing. Okay, so let's leave it there.
It's a crappy job, thank you, Member.
Oh, no, it's the kind of thing that I like doing because it's to do with communication. Okay, Peter, 42.
Well, step 1 is in this agenda as well, there's 2 bylaws that pertain to amendment of the zoning bylaw, one of which has to do with an amendment of the definition of a retail cannabis store. Anything else with respect to changes pertaining to cannabis is going to be still coming down the pike. Things are still in flux, and staff is not in a position to make recommendations other than noting that provincial policy is gradually coming together and appears to be at this stage respectful of municipal wishes and desires when it comes to zoning for these kinds of things. So we'll see how that continues to develop.
Okay, well, that's good. Yes, I think we do need a policy. First, there's going to be a report. I imagine the report's going to be relatively short. I see that the federal law went for a royal assent today, so it's happening. My understanding is also that the province will allow local zoning to override something. I don't know. However, they don't allow that in terms of group homes or care homes, where they say their provincial regulations override local zoning. So that's only worth the paper it's written on until such time as I see it promulgated. But okay, so we'll leave that one there because we do need that recommendation and policy. What's the piece about liquor primary?
I think that was just your query as to whether or not
Oh,
there was
I know what
some
it was.
link
Because
between
there
the
was some
two.
suggestion that cannabis would be sold through liquor primary outlets in BC. Okay, so let's leave all that together. The next one, Peter?
There is a matter with respect to TUP policy in our closed agenda,
Yeah.
so I'll just leave it at that for the moment.
Let's leave it there for now. This one was supposed to be removed last time, 45. No, it wasn't. I've written here in my previous minutes, staff to respond. But there's something in, there's a letter from our MP on that one today. So I suggest that, knowing that it's coming up, we can take that one out. 45 can go, Sean. Because we now know that it's not in fact phase 2 of the Clean Water Wastewater Fund. It's an entirely new thing altogether. Sea and lot update.
So we're in a holding pattern, we're waiting for the drainage equipment, so we need manholes, pipe, etc., which has all been ordered. And staff are currently putting up signs.
To the effect of, don't park here on such and such a day.
To the,
All the signs in the
We
village.
just talk
Oh,
about
no, I'm talking about sea and lot.
just
In other words, how are we going to, we're not going to try and do it on a Sunday, obviously. So,
paving of the lot?
no, because there's going to be a massive hole in the lot for a while. People can't park there.
Yeah, it's gonna take about a week to do all the drainage work.
Okay, so what's the plan in the interim? Suspend the permit parking area?
Would you close?
During the week,
Would you
yeah.
close the lot?
Yeah.
Just
I'd
probably.
imagine you'd have to close it.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you've got that in hand, because obviously right now, Lions Bay Avenue is effectively signed to say permits required May to June.
Mhm.
But visitors need a place to park, obviously. So, okay, fine. And so when do you expect that to happen? You're waiting for the gear to arrive?
We're waiting for the manhole and the piping to arrive, and once we finish installing the signage, then we'll tackle that.
And we're doing the work, right?
Yeah.
The backhoe is powerful enough?
Yeah.
Okay, great. That sounds like progress. We'll leave that one up there just to keep us apprised. The schedule of utilized reserves operating capital expenditures, is this the report that we're seeing today?
This
Yes.
is in today.
Okay, so let's take that one off because we know it's coming up. 50, Shauna? Lions Bay Beach Park update.
So we're installing signs. Once we're done that, then we'll start tackling the other stuff on our list, including the drainage and the shower,
Drainage? What drainage?
the drainage of the parking lot, and the paving of the parking
No,
lot.
I'm talking about Beach Park now. No,
Right.
not the parking lot.
Right. So
So-
once we finish installing the signage throughout the village, the signposts, then we'll tackle the parking lot, and then we'll tackle the remaining work on the
Okay.
beach park.
And the remaining work is?
The shower, the boat, or the kayak rack the design has to be provided to yourself, so we can talk about it.
Yeah, okay. There's some signage coming, but that's a different project. We're seeing, this is quite a meaty agenda actually, so we're going to see something about community signage in this meeting today. Okay. Ron, This is your baby?
No, I think there was some, of the 30 grand budget, I think there was, the showers are part, the new kayak was part.
The fence.
The fence, the handrails, let's call it the potpourri of sundry stuff.
Mhm.
And any progress with Russ doing some design work on
No,
Front?
but I haven't reached out to Russ.
Okay.
I assumed that you would.
Are you asking me to?
Could you,
Okay.
please?
Yeah, that'd be good. This is for the billboard
Yep.
for potential designs for future years type
Yep.
of thing to get start garnering input
Okay,
from
so
them.
I will ask him to do something so that it comes to you or Peter for,
What size are you contemplating of this billboard to be?
I'm not sure what, I was away at the time when the assignment was given, so I'm not sure exactly what Russ was asked to do.
My sense is it's sort of the size of this table, 4 by 6, with
Coming soon.
less text and more drawing.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good for now. Let's leave that there. There's some planters that need to be moved. Signs that need we meaning I and Nye more secondarily. I'll take full responsibility for the lack of progress on trying to get signage coordinated or harmonized with the marina. Essentially, I was shot down in flames. They like the signage as it is, their signage. So I guess we'll have to live with it. It's kind of hard to understand. Okay, and that seems to be it.
Are we talking about 52 and 53?
I'm fine with what's on the minutes from last one. Give Peter a break on this one.
52 and 53.
52 and 53, yeah, which would be the traffic delineating posts, which I'm sure you haven't hired a professional yet.
No.
And I'm sure on the sale of the road closure and the steps to that.
We are waiting for MOTI to provide their approval.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, fine. So we'll. That's not really a report. That's a report in. But let's have a resolution to receive those information items. Thanks. A motion and a second. All in favour? Opposed and carried. And now to the IRRs. I don't propose to belabor this because we have a bit of a full package. Just one or two things because we did spend quite some time on this last time, and also we have now seen the resolution section of the IRRs, and I don't think I'm going to. I just want to clarify some of the things here that I had asked for, which staff will be pleased to know will actually alleviate some workload rather than the other way around. So sure, can we just jump into it? So there's still no photos. I'd like the photos in there.
Photos of which ones?
The ones that, when I sent the IRRs in, they were accompanied by photos. 3 of them. So that's that request, and the other one is...
So I'm going to just object to a photo of a hydro box that somebody vandalized with spray paint. Like, why do we need to include a photo of that when we know what we're talking about is a hydro box that staff has been asked to repaint or cover with a vinyl wrap? So
That wasn't us that
Not-
painted
not-
orange paint on the electrical stickers?
No.
Oh.
seriously?
No, that was my comment, seriously.
No, really.
Oh.
Anyways, I'll go back and look at what other photos
Well,
you sent.
again,
but-
understand, this is for the very few people who will be reviewing this from the public to understand what's being talked about. I guess they can go and drive by if they really care, because it's there in public eye. So you don't want to put the pictures on?
I'll go back and look at what other photos you sent.
It's part and parcel of the
It's a
request.
challenge getting these things in a readable format to begin with without including photos, unless they're absolutely necessary. But like I said, I'll review what there is to see if it really is going to add sufficiently.
Okay. Okay, item number 247. The whole point here was not a whole highly detailed request. That was more justification why I was asking. The question was, can we professionally lay out and paint new parking stalls?
I query why you think they're not professionally laid out already, other than the fact that they're quite faded and could use a repainting. And we've acknowledged that perhaps we can add an extra stall on the other side of the hydro post.
Well, because, and here it is, at the top, the ambulance spaces are one too many, according to their lease. There's a very wide space, I think, that's supposed to provide access to the stairs, but people park there because they don't know better, including me. And sometimes I'm thinking, should I be parking? I'm not sure. It doesn't say no parking, so I'll park here.
So ultimately, that space is supposed to be leveled somewhat and designated as a handicap zone with an adjustment of the ramp to get to the upper meeting rooms, especially when we have chambers upstairs. We're going to need to have something that's accessible. Also, the seniors want to be able to use that space up there, so that's work that needs to be done still.
Is that done with paint?
It's done with a backhoe and rocks to retain on either side of the stall because of the slope. So to get some kind of even terrain for that parking stall, we're going to have to do some work.
Okay, well, that's something that I'm sure council is going to want to opine on. I would not support building one flat parking space with retaining walls there. We're not going to debate that now, but this is what I'm talking about, professionally layout and paint. I don't know who says we do not want double round end parking still. Who's we doesn't want that?
I say that on behalf of staff. You're going to reduce the size of the amount of space there is for parking.
There's plenty, but fog line does not prevent crossing. Yeah, clearly you can cross a fog line, but you're not supposed to.
Why not?
There's no other municipality in Metro Vancouver that puts fog lines across the ends of their parking spaces, except Lions Bay. It's just so everybody understands, it's to make it look a little more welcoming, rather than painting off a line in front of your parking spaces.
It's the roadway. It designates the roadway. Anyways, we can. I won't debate that here.
Well, this is why I want it professionally laid out, so we don't have to have this debate. So is the answer yes or no?
Some of these things are definite no's, like a 3-hour parking time limit. It's not needed. It will create all kinds of issues for staff. And on the weekends, we have people renting the hall, filling the parking lot.
Well, staff have a parking decal, of course, but
Staff don't want to put a parking decal on their vehicles. So we're going to have to use a daily parking permit every day?
There also is a concern for people who do pay for the use of the hall all day. We have people who are in it for 12, sometimes 2 days, and then having to run out every 3 hours and move their car.
It wouldn't be practical.
And they're the people
question
who
was
actually pay
only-
us for the hall.
the parking is full on the weekend from beachgoers, not from hall users, beachgoers.
How
The
do you
question-
know that?
Because I see them taking their plastic toys down to the beach, or I see the same person dropping off his party of 5 and coming up here and parking and walking down. Why? Because I drive past all the time checking. That's how I know.
So maybe instead of
So is that a
3-hour
problem?
parking, why would we care? Other than the fact that hall renters might need those spots. So
Because-
maybe what the signage should say is reserved for municipal business, or something like that.
Fine, that'd be great. Tell us what the parking plan says, the future parking plan. The point is, all other visitors have to pay. So there is free parking all around the village, and is this part of it? If it is, fine.
Part of the parking plan, as I understand it, is if people want to park above the highway, they can do so almost anywhere for free, and they don't have to have a resident permit or an annual permit,
Right.
and they can walk down to the beach.
And they are then taking away space from people who need to use it for the hall. That's why. Same for the park and ride, but the park and ride is going to be marked permit, I know, and same for this area up here next to the notice board. That's also designated on the map to be permit required. Okay, fine. So I just pointed out that visitors are using this parking space, meaning it's not available for other uses. If you're fine with it, that's fine with me.
We haven't had
I'm not,
any.
I
haven't had any.
don't, agree with the way this is going, because we've been told many, many, many times over the years from villagers that they don't want to turn into North Vancouver, where you have to pay for every little spot where you're gonna park or do something. You're so restricted, you can't park your car anywhere, and you end up in a situation where it's impossible to park. And if we're not careful, we're gonna have that same problem here. We have a problem with the beach, we have a problem with beach parking already. And if we're not careful, we don't proceed very carefully, we are gonna have a bigger problem. We're gonna be told by residents that they're not happy about parking. That's a big issue in the village of Lions Bay.
A letter right here. I think that's the whole point.
No, but the more regulation you put in place, the more difficult it's gonna get to measure it and monitor it. The more signs you put up, the harder it's gonna get to control.
I think we're talking across purposes. My question was, do we want to restrict visitors parking at the hall?
Okay.
Because they are.
We haven't had any complaints from, that I'm aware of, from anybody renting the hall
Yeah,
that
they
they
couldn't get
haven't
spots.
been able to park.
And they often start very early in the morning, so I suspect
They
that
take it.
when it's not
Mhm.
rented, then it is maybe beachgoers, but a lot of these who rent it like for 18 hours, they start really at the crack of dawn, so they probably,
Okay.
same with staff, when we come in during the week, we're in early, so the spots are available.
Okay, I only asked the question. I have no position one way or the other.
Providing you with some preliminary responses.
Okay, fine. Okay, let's, I think we've beat that one to death, and nobody likes to see me lose my temper, so let's move on. 251, did we respond to the resident, or did we decide that I was going to respond to the resident?
I have not responded to the
I
resident.
haven't yet.
Are you going to?
Have you decided? It is gonna be,
I can tell them that my position is that it's not, this is what I would propose to say to the resident. So if council's fine with that response to the resident, then I'm fine with sending them.
Well, I mean, this is part of a future. I'll just point out, we don't have a parking plan. We have some parking provisions. This is another provision, which I'm fine with. I don't like the idea of designating certain spots resident only in a parking space that residents can park anywhere they like. And more to the point, the premise that residents are going to be slightly better behaved than non-residents is close to ludicrous. So I would not support designating the first 7 spots. Nods around the table. Do we particularly want to mark these 7 spots resident only? Seeing no takers, I'd say proceed as you suggested, Peter. Okay, and I think that's probably enough, other than the fact, can we get the resolutions also in 10 point? Anybody else?
Number 227, Mayor Burr, did you do on your research for your AG?
227, sorry, is that in resolutions or in?
Requests, page 19 of 160 at the bottom.
This we decided when we needed it, we would hire it from
Okay.
an AV company.
So that's a strike?
Yeah, I guess we can strike it.
Okay. Thank you.
It'll
Okay.
cost more than doing it ourselves, but it does mean that it works as well, so.
And since we're on the strike mode, and I can see if I can do it better out, if you could flip to page 21 of 160 and review 248 and 250, it would appear that Peter is suggesting no and no.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I asked it because I thought it was a good idea, but if the answer is no, the answer is no. So those can move to
Strike.
the dead IRR section.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, what does the bylaw officer use the iPhone for? Or any phone?
To receive calls, to call me sometimes on the weekend, to send me
No, I mean
emails
for
or
application
messages
type of thing.
when he's out in the field.
Other than as a phone.
Just uses it as a vote.
So there's no-
Residents can call.
There's no app that he uses?
For what? There's no pay by plate, there's no telepark option, so what would he need an app for?
Well, to issue tickets, but,
On a phone?
yeah. Yeah, to be honest, I just assumed you'd use an app, but, so we're handwriting tickets.
Yeah. Nice and easy, gives us a record. Shauna uses that record to follow up, if necessary. We have to process everything with the ICBC as well, so yeah, it's helpful to have that record.
Okay. So motion to adopt IRRs as discussed. Thank you. Second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed and carried. And on we go. That was the fun housekeeping part. Now we come to the meat of the meeting, starting with the CFO's report on page 27.
And remember, if I could be the warm-up act for her, after meeting with her and reviewing the information in hand, I was also happy to say that in terms of CFO stuff, her corporate calendar is pretty much complete for the year, other than the annual report. She's going to do an early mid-year review versus having it done for us in September, which would be a little on the stale side. And to the report that's in front of us, which I'll hand off, in my view, she's accomplished what I've asked, which gives a high and low view of the reserves, both restricted and regular. And it's certainly in the spirit of the email that I asked her to do this. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, I don't propose that we go through the numbers, but the report's in front of us. So, Pam, is there anything salient you'd like to point out to us before one or two questions?
No, maybe just go with questions. I basically wanted to, my objective was to take what was on the financial statements, the biggest number in the financial statements, and break it down, explain what it was, and this is what our actual reserves are. So get an understanding of what the reserves are. That was my objective. There's probably a little more detail in here that you need, but the high level was that this is a report I actually do for the auditors. I have to reconcile every year. We do split it. I still take the time to split into general water and sewer fund, even though it's not a requirement of the community charter anymore. One of the main reasons is because of sewer. We're kind of unusual in that only part of the village pays sewer, and this is funded completely by Kelvin Grove residents. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think it's always important to track that surplus separately, because I just don't think it would be right to take that money and spend it on something other than sewer, because it was collected by the people through the sewer utility, unlike water and general, where everyone in the village pays those fees. And so are there any questions?
Okay, thanks. I got confused between the use of the word capital fund $19 million and capital fund $608,000 or 783 closing balance. But the first capital fund, the $19 million one, that's the accumulated surplus or invested capital?
It's invested in tangible capital assets, so it's our TCA less any related debt. So we take the total value of our, the net book value of our assets, but then any debt we have that we use to purchase that has to be deducted from it. So it's called investment in tangible capital assets.
Okay.
So it's basically the capital assets that have been fully paid for.
Okay. And so then the 848 number, is that restricted reserves?
It's restricted in a sense. There's a lot of flexibility around some of it. It's essentially made up of the Curly Stewart Fund. The gas tax money we get, we are required to keep that, account for it separately. And our capital fund, that was a reserve that was actually a bylaw. I have some notes on that. This goes back to 1979. And the bulk of it is made up of land sale. We had a Kelvin Grove corner lot sold in 2006, and $377,000 went into there. There's been some minor pieces of land. I can't track it all the way back because it goes all the way back to 1979, but I know in decades ago there was some taxing for money to go into reserves as well. So that money can only be used for capital. And then the balance is what we call unrestricted funds. It's the flow of our surplus
That sort of cash items.
Yes,
That
the
is,
unrestricted amounts. It's kind of a, you can look at it as working capital, like you always want to have a balance in there, because if something were to happen that wasn't budgeted, like we had a few years ago, a major road repair required that wasn't capital, we couldn't borrow for it because it's not capital, that would have to come from that. So it's like working capital, and it's completely unrestricted, as opposed to the reserve funds, which have restrictions, and the investment in tangible capital assets isn't cash, it's our assets.
yeah. So where do we see that 1159 number?
That is the purple, no, sorry, the yellow
Yeah.
on the, so I.
And then where's that breakdown? Is it this sheet on page 31?
No, it's,
29 of 160.
it's, if you look at 29, it's composed, like, this is sort of, this is probably more detail than you need, but this is the reconciliation I do for the auditors, but it's kind of the cash, so the first three numbers after the opening balance move up to the capital, and then it's difference in our long-term debt, the interest on reserves and the transfer to reserves move up to the reconciliation of the reserve fund, and you're essentially just left with your current year's surplus. And that's what the final page is. I tried at a very high level to explain what the $712,000 surplus was.
So that includes the rebudgets.
It includes, it's just a portion of it. A big portion of it, $350,000, is grants that we received. So the grants on the financial statements go into revenue, but they're used to purchase capital. So it's
It's a bit crazy,
still,
isn't it?
it is. But I think it would, even though it might be a bit overwhelming, I think it was important to look at it this way, because this is what our reserves truly are. I mean, we look at our reserves in terms of the budget, but it's a little bit different, because the biggest example is the loan. That when we got that loan, that was cash, so I show it as revenue for the budget, because it's cash I don't have to tax for, that we use to pay for assets. But in terms of the financial statements, it's not revenue, it's a liability, it's money we owe. So I found when I started doing this a few years ago, it helped consolidate my understanding of reserves in
Yeah.
the financial statements as
Yeah.
well. So essentially, the main source of the unrestricted money is our surplus, but it's not a surplus in terms of how we think of the budget.
No.
It's, because like the grants, I mean, the biggest component of that is that grant revenue we got, and that is why the water surplus is so high this year. But next year it will be lower, because that grant money is going to be used to purchase assets. So it's going to be transferred up into the asset line.
Yeah, it's almost apples and oranges to a certain extent. So, bottom line, our reserves, in terms of money we have put away for a rainy day, is 1159 plus 848.
That's correct.
So that's the best part of 2 million, just over 2 million.
Yes.
How does that compare to other communities like Lions Bay?
Well, that's where it gets hard to compare.
Yeah.
And why that's sort of the last part of my report was the most important part. In terms of answering the question, what's enough in reserves, your asset management plan tells you that. And we will know within a year, actually within 6 months, we'll have a much better understanding of how our reserves weigh up to what we actually need. And part of that decision is political. I mean, whether or not you think you should tax now for future assets or tax in the future, there's grant funding, but it will still identify what we're short in terms of funding future assets, and then the political decision is how you want to tax for that and how you want to pay for that.
Will it also identify money that ought to have been spent in the past that hasn't been?
Indirectly it will, because if we have a huge shortfall, by the very nature, that says that if you have assets that have to be replaced in the next 5 or 6 years and you don't have the money to replace them, then
What are you
you
gonna do
probably
about it?
should have
Yeah.
had more money in your reserves.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that if we got this far without having spent on it, we're starting from zero again. So there's no unspent past. It's only future spend that we need to fund.
That's right.
Actually, remember, it's actually debatable whether we're in a negative position now, because if you think of the founding fathers almost 50 years ago, so proudly boasting the lowest tax rates in Canada. And accordingly, now we're faced with 50-year-old water towers that have a number attached to it for replacement that are staggering.
That were put in cheap in the beginning.
And we haven't even gotten to the pipes that are in the ground. So really, I think when that asset management plan comes, it will be incredibly sobering.
So that's one of my points about this, is that I think that I look at this, and the only question that comes up in my head about it, is it sufficient for what we know is coming at us? Okay, is it going to, does it reflect what we know or what we see right now, and that's exactly right. Given the way things were done initially, you know, like, let's just get it built, and you know, and they let things that slide for years and years and years to the point where it's almost unmanageable. So I guess my only question when I read the numbers here was, is that reflective of what we know is coming at us? And is this, is it gonna be defended, or is it gonna work well with the asset management plan? Is it gonna,
This is what we know we have. The
Yeah.
asset management plan will tell us what we need
That's right.
over the next 20 years.
Yeah.
And it takes information we already have.
and that's
Like
our
we have
due diligence. That's
We
right.
have the infrastructure master plan, and we just got our bridge report, and it consolidates all of that, plus identifies other assets we need information on. It puts it all together, but it's like a living document. It will constantly be updated. It's not like we do it and then don't do it again for 20 years. We update it. The maintenance part has a big part of it. How we choose to maintain our assets to extend their life. So it's sort of a starting point. Like, I actually have it as a multi-year project in the 5-year plan. The starting point is the asset management plan, which we'll have in about 6 months.
I mean, Anmore, and Ron and I heard when we met with some regional development people, has this, what they call a financial sustainability plan. That everybody, you've got to see Anmore's plan. Oh, I read it. It's essentially their 5-year plan projected against reserves. What you don't know, of course, is what grants you're going to get. You don't know what loans you're going to take, and you don't know what's going to come up as an emergency. I would like to see this thing done through 2018, though, because we know what our 2018 expectations are in terms of land sales. Now, we've done land sales in such a way that's sort of our rainy day money. Now, it's going to be restricted. The big land sale is restricted money, but it's money we can lend to ourselves. The road end sale at Kelvin, that's going to be unrestricted, right?
Yes.
Restricted for capital, so it'll be
Yeah, but it's
restricted in the
always,
same way, but yeah.
Not for operating, but
Just like our current reserves,
yeah.
restricted to a set,
It'll
but pretty
go to
flexible.
reserves, but it'll go to
Yeah.
unrestricted reserves. You can spend it on any capital item that you want. Although, in fact, your reserves you can spend on operating, can't you? Unrestricted reserves you can spend on truly anything, operating as well.
The unrestricted surplus you can, yes.
Yeah, I mean, so you know, to answer a question like Jim's, we need to see 2018s, and in fact, you could plug the 5-year plan numbers in here to give us a sense of what our reserve balance is going to look like, and if they cross zero, clearly that's a bad situation. Now, we don't know what we're going to spend because we don't have the asset management plan yet, but we have an indication from the infrastructure master plan that says we've got a $30 million shortfall that has to be spent over the next X years.
I think for me on that one, Carl, it's the CFO's time. I think we could plug part of this if we use the notional freezing 2017 in time and disregard a whole bunch of operational issues, as in plus and minus and ARP. I mean, that's what she's done here in the piece where government reporting is part balance sheet, part lending, part.
Yeah, it's
this.
crazy.
So, I mean, she could certainly plug a number for council based on the anticipated big events of 2018.
It's in the budget.
It's in the budget, and assume we're balanced on everything else in the
So it's
office.
really just adding the budget to this
It
year
is,
end
yeah,
balance of
that's what I was going to
1159.
say, is that the piece you need is actually in the budget, and then down at the bottom, I show what the transfer to reserves is, assuming the land sells for the price that we budgeted
But in
for.
this presentation, because this presentation is on one sheet of paper, you can see the whole story. It's fantastic.
But this is information. This is information about what we've got and what it looks like right now. And this is what, if you look at the books, this is what you see and what we see. And, you know, that's what you're asking of council, to accept this. So,
If council will go with this, that we accept the report as is, and with the CFO going to do a mid-year for our last meeting in July, if council give me the opportunity to meet with the CFO, maybe we can come up with an extra column on this for 2018.
I think you're 90% of the way there. You've just got to do the second 90%.
Oh, yeah, no,
now.
I can do that. It'll just be essentially a different presentation of the budget, but I think the key part is the budget as it stands now. I show a number that's being transferred to reserves, and that is what
Just-
will
do
increase
you-
this.
Oh, I've got it here. Do you
Number.
remember off the top of your head what it is?
Nope.
transfer to reserves, 2018, $3.1 million. So that's savings. No,
It's a
because
combination of restricted and unrestricted. It'll be the Calvin Grove and the Brunswick Beach
that's not
property.
spending on the water remediation. That's actual savings, 3.1, yeah. So that we need to bear in mind, colleagues, because $2 million doesn't sound like a heck of a lot to me, but $5 million is starting to sound reasonable. Now, some of it's restricted what you can
Yeah,
spend it
that's a
on.
key part. The bulk of it is restricted, and we can only use it to purchase land that gives access to
But we can
the
borrow.
same body of water, but we can borrow from it, but it is borrowing.
Yeah, yeah. But in terms of cash,
Oh, yeah.
it's...
Oh, it's a good thing.
It's at least the
yeah.
cash part is taken care of. And I'm sure that the loan terms to ourselves will be quite favorable. Okay. Okay, motion to receive and a second. Just to finish off, thanks Pam, this is hot stuff actually. This is what I've been hoping for some time. This is, if somebody wants to know how healthy are we, I say here, look, it's even in color.
You just need that context of what we need to
Well,
really
it-
determine how healthy it is.
Well, we need to see this report sooner rather than later. When is that?
Our launch meeting is next Wednesday,
Okay.
so, yeah, we're quite excited about it.
And just to finish off on this thing, this animal thing that everybody keeps exhorting us to do, I think we're beyond the financial sustainability report. We have an infrastructure master plan and the upcoming asset management study, report, whatever you call it. I think we're going to be in a bit much more clearer situation of what it is that we have and what we're going to need to do in terms of future taxation or not.
Well, a big part of the asset management plan is taking, like I say, the information we already have, and the IMP plays a big role in that. I mean, there's going to be a lot of information.
Yeah, the
from
work's
that.
half done.
And that actually impacted the price in terms of, we were able to let everyone know the information we do have, even just the bridge inspections we just had are fairly valuable. And they have the tools to consolidate that in a way with their technology that we can't, to determine what our long-term needs are.
Okay, everybody happy? So I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thanks, Pam. Great stuff. Why am I? No, I'm looking at the wrong agenda page. That was last. And on we go to the extraordinary vehicle permit application on page 33. Can I have a motion? And a second discussion? I have one or two questions on this. What is the basis on which we charge a fee sometimes and not for other times when we allow people to? This is not an encroachment agreement, is it? This is an extraordinary vehicle parking allowance, and the fee is not insubstantial. You know, it's in the multiple hundreds a year. Are we? This is the only extraordinary vehicle permit in the village, right?
Yeah.
Yet I see, not parked on roadways, mind you, but certainly parked on the boulevard, plenty of other extraordinary vehicles, but not on the actual roadside.
Well, this vehicle is on the boulevard, it's
Yeah.
not on the paved surface.
It's not actually on the paved surface either. So my other question around this is, I've noticed that these particular individuals have cleared a space on the other side of the road and gravelled it, also on the boulevard.
I don't know that they've cleared anything. There's all kinds of places throughout the village where pull-offs, if you want to call them that, or parking spots, whether natural or man-made, they're all over the place. So
This
this
has had-
appears to me to be a natural.
This has 5 tons of gravel poured in the last 2 weeks.
Hmm.
I know because I drive past it 7 or 8 times a day.
I was up there just the other day, I didn't notice any gravel.
Yeah. No. So, but it's not. That's a different situation. That's not an extraordinary vehicle parking permit.
Sorry, what is it?
The new pad, the new parking space.
Are you talking about this particular applicant's
Yes.
parking space?
Yes.
I don't know. I didn't know that there was a bunch of new gravel there. Would be
Just-
a little bit presumptuous considering that this application was coming forward.
Yeah, but it's on the other side of the road. It's not where he currently parks his horse trailer. I don't know that it's for the horse trailer, although I don't ever see anything parked there. So maybe it is for that horse trailer.
I don't know.
News to me.
Okay, but that's neither here nor there. I just mentioned that for your potential follow-up, just to check that you're aware of it at least, because certainly that would be an encroachment. But this is for the extraordinary vehicle parking, so there's a motion and a second.
So, maybe I'm reading this wrong, but this says across the street.
Yeah, that's currently it's across the street, and that's what that's why I asked.
The driveway is really steep, and there's no way he could put that horse trailer up on his own, get it up that driveway, and can't park it on his side of the street. There's no space.
Today.
There's a drainage ditch, I think, there. So the
Not
logical,
anymore.
well, anyways, the logical place, it appears, and it's off the roadway and out of the way of traffic, and has been for the last 3 years, is where he's got it. So, and he's been paying the $80 a month. That was in the fee by law since before I came along.
Do we really want to ding one of our residents $80 a month for no real?
Well, I kind of flagged that as well. When I read it, I thought, what's the point of the fee? For example, it seems to exceed the administration costs, so we're exceeding cost recovery. And I would just think we grant it on the merits of the need.
Well, I wouldn't want to not have an extraordinary permit requirement, because then everybody's going to start parking their boats and their
Right.
campers and everything at the side of the road.
But I guess we're debating whether we should give them a permit or not what the fee is, because that's
Yeah.
a separate argument. But
That is a separate argument, and so let's not cloud the issue. Although I feel that's maybe a little high, but it is what it is. So we're not going to. I mean, yeah, I'll just point out that's what's 80 times 12? $1,000. It's a lot.
I think the history of it was they were very grateful because they literally had no place to put this horse trailer other than having to take it back to where the horse is. And so they were actually,
They're actually lucky
Very
because opposite
enthusiastic
them
and
is
relaxed.
nobody's house. It's not a vacant lot really, but it's, I guess it is a vacant lot. It's a triangle, it's a flat line type. So they lucked out in terms of where they are and where they need to be. So any further discussion on this needed? Are we ready for the question, which is to grant the permit for another 3 years? That's a yes. All in favor and opposed? That carries. Okay, now we get into the more difficult ones, more difficult to understand, that is. But first we'll just knock off the trees, views and landscapes committee tree application 86.
Anything to report, Mayor? Mayor reports, anything?
No.
For council, I was going to mention that you and I met with the new owners of Furry Creek and his representative and discussed things of common interest, and that discussion might continue after the election, and I would suggest in closed if Mayor Bird wants to comment on some of that discussion.
Yeah, I mean, typically we reserve closed discussion for land, legal and labor. Yeah, there might be some opportunities to discuss some of the advice that we got. The guys that came to see us, the president of the owners, the president of the company that owns the land, is the youngest looking land developer I ever saw. I think it's fair to say and allowable to say is that they've bought these pieces of land here and here, and these 3 numbered lots here. So this is just over the border from Westland, so this is in electoral area A. The reason that they bought these pieces here was for a road, because as you can see this is Provincial Park. So the idea would be to utilize existing highway egress access to put a road up in here and up onto the flatlands here. The problem for them, and something that's going to be important for Lions Bay, is that the electoral area A OCP, which has just gone through public hearing, and about which I can receive no input, but I can certainly give output because I was on the hearing panel, is that it does not allow development in electoral area A at Howe Sound without a change in governance, which is a way of saying some local municipality needs to take on utility provision, if not amalgamation. But fire, water, fire and water. So, interesting.
Boundary expansion opportunity.
It would call for a potential boundary expansion of one of the two municipalities. The problem, West Van, I don't think wants to expand, but maybe they do. Lions Bay, I don't know. This is not something that's going to take place in the next few weeks. This is years and years. It would require absorbing the lands from electoral area A, it's a metro piece, so on and so forth. And then would somebody like Lions Bay, if we were the interested municipality, would we take up Ocean Point and Montezambit Creek and Strachan at the same time?
Sounds like a challenging opportunity because the supply of water would be critical, whether they use wells or whatever, who knows?
It would be very difficult to get our water all the way down there, by pipeline anyway. Yeah. But how they supply new developments up and down the corridor is by well. Although Montezambit, how do they, I always get confused. How does Montezambit supply its water right now? The West Van piece of Montezambit?
They have a well.
They have a well.
Seascapes you're talking about?
Well,
No.
no.
One is on the point, just at the edge of the west van.
So there's two pieces. There's Montezambit Wine, that's in the electoral area. And then there's a few houses in actual Montezambit that is part of West Van.
I don't know.
One of them has,
December.
they don't have a water system. They have individual dip tubes into a weir structure so that they are unregulated by coastal health because they have individual water systems. Details.
Anyway,
Yeah.
everybody's updated.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. So that was a council report, and now I'm struggling to find my place in the agenda.
Just committees. Steve.
Committees, trees, page 41.
Thank you, I'll represent these, Mayor. This application's gone through pretty clean, and if council flips to page 47 of 160, you will recall previously seeing the layout of this house because of the cantilevered stuff, and also the request for some easement pieces. So the tree cleanup is part of this, and the tree committee has recommended that the applicant's permitted to cut and clean the specified maple and cedars. All wooden debris must be removed, and I would so forward on their behalf with the recommendation.
Thank you. So that's a motion and a second on that one. This is to approve the recommendation of the tree committee. Anything you'd want to add there, Nye?
No. It's required for the driveway.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at this, it looks like the trees belong to the house. They just happen to be on the other side of the property line.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. And there's no emergency service report, so now we'll move on to a recommendation, which I will move that Lions Bay parking regulations be suspended near the vicinity of the venues on Canada Day, subject to safety considerations for emergency vehicles to operate, such as the fire hydrants at the fire hall and cul-de-sacs, and the Canada Day event and associated activities be exempted from the provisions of noise bylaw number 283 of 1998 as amended, pursuant to section 6M thereof, up to 12 midnight, and that Lions Bay Beach Park remain open until 12 midnight. Can I have a second? Fred, you look like you want to discuss this one.
Well, I'm just curious why 12 midnight?
Well, I did flag that in my emphasis. Why 12 midnight, Peter? Is that what's been requested by the events committee?
I believe so.
10 the hours.
I know they're having fireworks. That would be
Fireworks
when it
at
gets
10
dark.
p.m. and
Maybe for cleanup and.
they
Yeah, I suspect most of the noise, the public will be gone long before midnight.
We did the same with Firefighters Day.
Yeah.
They
But is it
request the
midnight?
closing an hour after it actually closes down to allow time to
Yeah.
clean up.
Yeah, I seem to remember we flagged it last year as well. So everybody good with that? Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Okay, now we get to the really interesting part, and that is we've got a slew of recommendations.
We got on table 9B.
Oh, sorry, beg your pardon.
9B.
Okay, so I will move that the annual report required under section 97 of the community charter be available for public inspection at the village office and via the village website on or before June 29, 2018, and the annual meeting required under section 99 of the community charter be held in conjunction with the regular council meeting on July 17, 2018, and that the notice of the annual meeting under Section 94 of the Community Charter be by way of A, posting in the public notice posting places, and B, publication on the village website and in the village update distribution. What does that mean? In the village, I think you probably meant 3 times. Oh no, that comes next.
Oh,
Well, we'll just take it as read, because it doesn't detract from the meeting. On June 29th, July 6th, and July 13th, 2018, has been reasonably equivalent to notice that would be provided by newspaper publication if it were practicable. That's the motion. Why would it not be practicable?
Because we don't have a local newspaper. So the charter allows us to deem something else if we don't have a local newspaper. Otherwise, we'd have to advertise in the North Shore News or the Whistler, which we don't know would have benefit. It's for Lions Bay.
Yeah. Right.
Sorry.
Okay. Can I have a second on that, guys? It's been seconded. Any discussion? This is really a housekeeping thing, not so Pam. And essentially, what council is being asked to certify, opine, resolve, is that putting it in the village update and on the website is equivalent to the legal requirement of advertising in, what is the exact wording of the thing?
of a local newspaper for 2 consecutive issues.
Okay, so we're saying that we feel that this is equivalent, if not better, for the reasons stated, and staff so advises, as I'm inferring. So are we ready for that question? It's been seconded, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All in favour and opposed? It carries. Okay, good. Okay, the part you've all been waiting for, and that is consideration of first and second reading, and if, as a result of discussion, we determine so to do, the actual first and second reading of the OCP designation bylaw number 408 of 2008, amended by bylaw number 525 of instant date. So, how are we going to tackle this one? Because this could go on for a long time. Peter, maybe you can just, the content we've considered plenty. So maybe you can just tell us what's different now in terms of the proposed approach than it was for development permits. Specifically as it pertains to impact on
That's right.
residents.
And Peter, to ask you to ramp up your marketing on this one.
So, the key difference between what you have before you and the previous iteration of this bylaw is that residents would no longer have to go through a stage whereby they have to apply for a development permit and receive a development permit. So there's just one less permit that they have to obtain and pay for. But the essence of what is required in order to comply with our legal obligations as a municipality in the circumstances is to follow more or less the regime which is set out, which means that if somebody wants to subdivide their land or if they want to build something new, then they need to, then the building official or inspector or the approving officer, as the case may be, is going to require that there be a hazard assessment in accordance with the guidelines that are attached. And I've tried to streamline those guidelines somewhat. Where there was repetition in some of the guidelines, I worked with Mr. Freely, who wrote the Cardillo report, to pare that down. So you'll see that there's a fairly lengthy list of of requirements and guidelines in the natural hazard assessment area 3C, but substantially pared down requirements in 3A and 3B. And I've also imported a few definitions that were in originally in the District of North Vancouver's OCP. I didn't import all of them, just a few, and I've been working through fine-tuning those, but the key definitions in that section are to do with new development, the definition of new development, and the definition of a new building. So if you turn to page 63 of the materials, you'll see that new development means A, construction of a new building or structure requiring a building permit. So if you don't require a building permit, you don't need a natural hazard assessment. Construction of a retaining wall over 1.2 meters in height, or a series of terraced retaining walls with a combined height of greater than 1.2 meters. And that's going to trigger as well a requirement for a soil deposit removal or land alteration permit, as that bylaw, which is in a holding pattern while we await approval from the various ministries, sets out. A subdivision, a rezoning, or a temporary use permit for purposes of short-term rentals. So those are the things that would trigger a natural hazard assessment being required. If the particular circumstances warrant, then they may be exempt from having to do that, and the exemptions are located on page 72 of the materials. So the usual ones for government exemptions are included, but the important ones for residents would be non-structural repairs or renovations, including roof and other exterior repairs or replacements which don't require a building permit. Construction of an accessory building, less than 10 square meters. Alteration of land which is of a minor nature, and that definition set out there is the same as what appears in the soil deposit and removal bylaw that council gave 3 readings to. Habitat creation by municipality. Planting of vegetation within 10 meters of top of bank would take it, provided that, yeah. So planting of vegetation is exempt, however, if you're doing it within 10 meters of the top of bank or top of a ravine bank.
On which side? In the ravine or outside the ravine?
Not down the ravine, so top of ravine bank.
Into the habitable land
Yeah.
portion, okay.
Yeah. And provision for setbacks can be reduced.
Sorry, can I just ask about that one though? Why the height restriction then? Why do you want to restrict planting close to a river?
I think the height restriction had to do with vegetation exceed 9 meters in height at maturity.
And that's a 30-foot tree. That's not a very big tree.
No, that might have something to do with wildfire hazard, but I'm not sure about that. I'd have to double check as to whether or not that was.
Okay, well we can nail down. I mean that's the thing
root
that
structure thing perhaps for ravines. I'd have to check.
Wouldn't it have more to do with a taller tree being more liable in a windfall situation and
Perhaps,
destroying
yeah.
the ravine?
Yeah.
pulling, but this is within 10 meters of top of bank, so it's not in the ravine.
Yeah, but if you got a big tree that blows over,
It will
the
mess
top
with
of
the
bank,
ravine.
It's going to tear off the top of the bank.
Right.
Yeah, could be. Well, I mean, 30-foot tree. That's a 5-10-year-old tree. But okay, so fine. Okay, I got it.
Okay. And so with this, as I noted at the meeting on April 10th, if a natural hazard assessment comes back with a notation by the qualified professional that the land can be used safely for the use intended without any conditions, then there's no covenant that would attach to the land. If there are conditions required in order for the engineer or professional to make that statement, then there must be, in accordance with the provincial legislation, a covenant registered under section 219 and registered against the land title. And that's in both the community charter provisions for the building inspector and in the Land Title Act for the
You have to stay now for 10 minutes. You have to listen.
Okay, I need some exercise.
So
So now, if it comes back no need, where is that record kept? Just in the file.
in the property file.
In the property file,
staffs
okay.
in the office.
And how voluminous and how scary is the covenant when one is needed? Is it what the QP states, or is it a standard set of fairly bland words?
It's a legal document that includes an indemnification clause as required by the legislation. So there are standard forms for that kind of clause, and I would just get the lawyers to provide me with standard wording for covenants. The QP's report would be attached as a schedule to that covenant, which is the normal way that these are done. And yeah, that's how that would be handled.
Okay, is that your report?
Other than,
Devil's in
perhaps
the details,
questions that people may have without me going through the whole thing, it would probably be better for council to let me know where the issues or questions are so that I can try and address them.
Okay, let's do just that then. Council.
If I could, first of all, thanks for removing the existing structure residence from it. I think that was a good move. I think it's going to make this a lot more palatable. But one thing I did catch my eye, I'm curious about, on page 55 of 160, last paragraph. It should be further noted that Pierre Fraley, the geoscientist who wrote the Cordelian report, does not agree with or support proposed quadrupling of residential density in the village.
Oh, Fred, that was going to be my question.
Oh, you can have it. In the guise of existing development and a proposed risk. As I think about the quadrupling it, I wonder about that as well. Wouldn't doubling it be the limit? Would that be a better limit?
Who says we're proposing quadrupling residential density?
Well, if you have one lot and you allow for 4 lots to be where one lot is, and you've just gone from one house to 4 houses.
If it qualifies for subdivision, sure. Yeah, because
that's
there's a
it.
minimum lot size requirement.
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, but it's not, we're not proposing the village gets 4 times bigger.
No, but in those areas where it's potentially possible to do that, then yeah, there would be an increase in density.
Okay, but would not the qualified professional's opinion then say, where there was 1 family, now there's 2, and so the risk doubles, and I'm okay with that? Or, because the risk is now double, and I'm going to be asking about this table in here somewhere, my opinion is predicated on that, on a case-by-case basis.
So, in the quantitative risk assessment of risk to life from the hazard, there is a component of that assesses, the number of elements at risk. So if you've got 1 house, you've got 1 element at risk. If you've got 4 houses, you've got 4 elements at risk. And that feeds into the calculation as to whether or not you're going to achieve a certain threshold that is.
But then that's
set
going to
in the
be, then
policy.
the guy's going to say, sorry, if you're going to densify 4 for 1, can't do it. You're on the wrong side of the line in the graph. Sure.
Potentially, or
But then-
or that if that's the intended use of the land, then in order to accommodate that intended use, you might need to incorporate some mitigation
Yeah.
to lessen it. to
But that's how we handle
something
it.
acceptable. Pardon me?
That's how we handle it. So I'm not sure what Freely's objection is.
I think we should move past Freely's paragraph.
So what he's getting at is that
Doesn't mean anything to me.
increasing the hazard or the number of people exposed to the hazard is something that in other jurisdictions they have chosen a much higher safety threshold, so that you'd have to achieve a 1 in 100,000 risk of individual loss of life per annum.
Instead of what?
Whereas for small scale development, this document proposes that you treat it more like existing development, which is generally has a minimum threshold of 1 in 10,000. So, and this document suggests that you only use the higher safety threshold for a substantial or major development, such as, for instance, the proposed Kelvin Grove development. That would require a 1 in 100,000 threshold, whereas this document proposes that a 4-lot subdivision only has to meet 1 in 10,000 threshold. So his suggestion is that any new development which exposes new people to a risk that wouldn't otherwise be exposed to that risk ought to be covered under the 1 in 100,000 sorry, no dollars here, the 1 in 100,000 threshold, as is done in other jurisdictions.
Okay, we'll note that suggestion from Mr. Freely, Dr. Freely, Professor Freely.
There is another aspect to this, and that is his suggestion that there's a significant component in his view which has not been addressed yet, and that is whether or not a societal risk factor should be taken into account. And what societal risk involves is where you have a hazard that presents a risk to a great number of people, or a significant number of people. There are different considerations and different methodologies for assessing what that risk looks like and what's acceptable to the community in terms of that hazard and that risk.
But how is that affected by development applications?
Well, if you've got a hazard that presents a catastrophic risk, how do you justify adding new development in the face of that hazard? So without some assessment as to what that risk actually looks like and how many fatalities you would suffer if that risk came to pass, there are ways of doing that, and ways that that assessment would be a study in and of itself, and you would have an assessment which probably would provide either recommendations or would provide you with parameters and provide you with information about what is acceptable and what isn't. And
I understand
council would have to make that determination.
Yeah,
but
it seems that's a separate project.
It is a separate matter.
How does it impact, or how is it impacted by development, which would take into account the identified risks for a given proposed site?
I guess the question is whether or not council is both legally and ethically in a position to permit new development in the face of hazards which have not yet been quantified, but which may present a catastrophic risk to a great number of people. That is the question. Whether or not you want to go down that road to explore what does that really look like. And my comment to Mr. Furley was, well, isn't that rather difficult to do when the risk is unquantified? And doesn't that depend on further study being done by the province as to what the nature of that risk truly is?
Yeah, my question exactly.
And his comment back was certainly that would be helpful, but you can do that kind of an assessment based on a regional analysis of similar type terrain and topography and other situations that have been studied. So it is something that's possible to do, but as I think I've noted for council, staff is still waiting for Emergency Management BC to get back to me regarding the potential for the province to look at and fund that kind of additional investigation.
So, two things. Initially, when this started, I heard comments from residents that they were concerned that all this stuff is being done around their property, and they've been there for years, and they know there's a risk in this area and all this kind of stuff, and they don't see what the heck this does. And so that doesn't really affect them as long as they're gonna be developing, unless they're gonna start developing something new and making a major change on their property, which is sell off a piece and put a townhome complex or whatever the case is. So the first part is, it doesn't change anything for residents who already own property in the village and are intending to maintain their residence and stuff like that. Secondly, then that means that it's only gonna come into effect for new development when it happens. And in that case, then, in my view, that would be a one for one thing, where they'd have to have a study done and an analysis done saying that geotechnically it's going to be a safe development for the village as a whole. So that to me sounds like due diligence. So far, what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing is we're batting 1,000 here with this thing. It's not out of control, because the first comments I heard were residents were panicking about it. And
Well, a lot of that was misunderstanding.
no, I'm sure it probably was.
Does this still take into account that you must evaluate downstream risk for people who will be impacted by your development? Same as before, same as for the development permit approach?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
so that's not changed.
qualified professional would still have to examine the impacts of the development on the land.
So, yeah, I mean, I think this is, I will say that, you know, I was actually happy with the drives for the development permits and DPAs, and that work has not been lost. My real question is, how do we set these limits? He's proposing 1 in 10,000 and a seismic event 1 in 2450, and who's to say that's the right thing for Lions Bay? How do we know whether that's right or not?
The seismic, the return period for taking into account seismic loading and that kind of slope stability is dictated by regulation. So,
Okay, that's good. So we don't have a choice, and that's the 1 in 2450.
yeah, or 1 in 2475 sometimes I've seen, and sometimes it's just rounded up to 1 in 2500.
Okay, fine. So that's legislative. Now, the 1 in 10,000, you know, I'm looking at this table here on page 85, and I wrote next to it, says who? Who says? Who says? And the risk factor calculation, I understand it, it's very easy, but what values are being plugged in there? Or does the qualified professional have to determine those values every time?
So just 85.
So somebody has determined that a risk greater than 1 in 1,000 is very high and unacceptable. A risk between 1 in 10,000 and 1 in 1,000 is high.
These numbers appear in a lot of literature that's generally accepted.
So it's sort of best practice.
Generally accepted, as I understand it, generally accepted qualitative descriptors that attach to these quantitative numbers.
Okay, fine.
So these are baseline kind of thing, it looks odd if it's less than this?
Yeah, if you're outside of what's tolerable or acceptable in this table, then you probably need to re-examine what you're doing.
So now the formula above that determines that number, where do all of these things come from? P sub H, P sub SH, P sub TS, VE?
This is the basic math of quantitative risk assessment.
Yeah, no, I understand. So E is easy. That E is always 1 because we're talking about individuals. V, who determines that?
The qualified professional.
Okay, so the QP does, every time they do this, we've required them to use this approach, this quantitative approach, and they must determine each of these parameters.
Unless, you know, the other aspect of what they're looking at is slope stability, in which case they may be calculating what is the factor of safety. And that's a whole different mathematical formula that is over my head, but engineers apparently.
But that's
know what they're
qualified,
doing.
that's qualified professional that makes
Yep.
that decision.
Exactly.
So when they put in Ansel Place, and they did phase one and phase two, they weren't allowed to go ahead with phase two until they had a qualified geotechnical person come up with a plan that would satisfy, and the plan would satisfy them was to have the catchment things up top, so that in case rocks come down the mountain, that it was gonna safeguard the houses up there and the houses down below, and that's what they did. They put that barrier in, and then West Van allowed them to go ahead and do.
Well, I'll just point out that the reason
whatever had to be
I
done.
like this a lot better than I did before was it's a policy, meaning it's relatively easy to change. No, because this goes in the OCP. Yeah. So it's not relatively easy to change. I was going to say, let's try it for a few applications and see how it goes. You know, is it too tight? Well, we'll soon find out.
I'm kind of with you on this one too, because, I mean, we see it later in the TUPS stuff, where it comes back in, or
Yeah.
these are the things we're gonna find out pretty quick whether this works or not.
Yeah.
And I think for my piece on this, I think to give Peter his, I never accuse you of big marketer, Peter, but I think this is a good job in mixing what was totally rejected before and dressing the big up. And it's a pretty logical idea of grandfathering what is the case, taking the larger new development, say you gotta make the whole thing. If there's a unique situation, you take care of that too. So I'm pretty much with it, and you've given me more comfort on each situation where a QP's involved has to go to the same step and all the rest of that stuff. So quite frankly, I'm good as it stands right now, and I like the idea of seeing how it tests out, and it'll be the TUPS stuff that comes forward faster than the other stuff does.
Will give us a sense of these things being out of whack.
And I think
Threshold-wise.
this is a very meaty package, but somewhere in there, I thought I saw that residents could come to council. I think it was in the TUPS, if they didn't like a ruling or something like that.
Ultimately, they can come to council.
So-
Ultimately, there's two things. One is in here. If someone, if the building inspector does not grant a building permit based upon a QP saying the land is safe with these conditions, you know, subject to the right of the municipality to require a peer review or a more detailed assessment than what's been done, then the applicant has a right to appeal to council.
And
So
say
that's-
what though?
That's
Well,
one
you can
thing.
guess where that one's likely to go.
Yeah, but so they're going to say what? They're going to say the building inspector won't give me my permit because I refuse to do what the QP says.
Yeah, and his peer review said we should do it.
So what is he going to say to council? What's council going to say? We'll do it anyway? No, of course not.
But it actually reminds me, there's an amendment that needs to, you know, be considered by council, and that is to section 10.1.8 on page 76, where it is the very matter that we're talking about, council reconsideration.
Yeah, you pointed that out though.
No, these are words that need to be added now on the
Oh,
file.
no? Oh.
Yeah. So that paragraph needs to be preceded with the words, subject to the municipality's rights with respect to requiring a detailed assessment or peer review. And then the balance of the thing can go.
Okay.
So there's that. I was seeking some guidance from Mr. Freely regarding 2450 versus 2475 versus 2500, but I didn't get an answer back in time for this meeting.
Well, we just
I
wanted
don't think it's
consistent.
a major, yeah, well, that was my question too. And then to Councilor McLaughlin's point, for TUPs, there's also an appeal process from the decision of the delegate who is me in making a decision. If the applicant doesn't like that decision, they can appeal it to council. Residents, it should be noted, cannot appeal a decision to council. It's only the applicant who can make that appeal, so,
Meaning neighbors.
yeah. Yeah, sorry, I should have said that. Neighbors.
So if they really don't like what's being proposed, what are their options?
Well, their options would be, you know, if I grant the application,
It's a rezone? No.
well, it's like a temporary rezoning. That's what a temporary use permit is. It's a rezoning land for a use that's not.
Oh, sorry, no, I'm not even
permitted.
at TUPs yet. I'm
Oh,
talking
no,
about.
I'm talking about TUPs.
Oh, no,
Sorry.
I'm talking about just a development.
Okay, well, the development is covered by the clause that I just read out.
Yeah, but what if a neighbor doesn't like the
So
proposition?
isn't it like the zoning bylaw guys that,
So there's a hearing, or is there a hearing?
or they use it as part of the info or something like that?
So we've got this swath of natural land. The only way that the proponent is going to be allowed to build a house there is to put up a 50-foot retaining wall. And he says, okay, I'm going to do it. And the neighbors say, I really don't think I want a retaining wall in my view. What's the neighbor's recourse?
Well, the neighbor's recourse would firstly be on grounds that potentially it's not, the risk is being transferred from the property owner to the neighbor. That would be my first ground if I was the neighbor. But if the neighbor just doesn't like the aesthetics of it, then I'm sure the neighbor would let staff know about that. But at the end of the day, if the qualified professional sets out what mitigation is required, and the
village issues the building permit
applicant-
eventually.
Yeah, so, I mean,
They
you
can
know,
do it.
it'd be difficult, so that might be a case where perhaps the building inspector isn't issuing it, you know, maybe staff is balking at issuing it because it is gonna be impactful to neighbors, and the applicant says you must issue it, and appeals to council in the circumstances, so ultimately that would potentially come to council.
So this
in
is
that
like a
way.
board of variance, sorry.
But it doesn't go to the Board of Variance. So that
I
was
know, I said it's similar.
this is not none of these are variance issues.
No,
No.
The Board of Variance is still only responsible for its very limited scope of things, adjudicating hardship. And that's only for a proponent, not for an affected
Yeah,
neighbor.
it's a bit of a hybrid here, yeah.
Wouldn't each situation require council diligence to sort these things out prior to prior to approval?
no, because there's no
Take
reason.
into consideration the the opinion of the professional person that's looked at it, but also what other residents in the area, how it's gonna affect the residents and stuff like that. Isn't that part of council's job?
Not unless it's a
No.
major development requiring rezoning.
No,
It's not gonna
no,
come
we
to
don't
council.
get to a
If
final.
it's a minor subdivision, it's the
Okay.
approving officer. So as the approving officer, I would be looking at all of the aspects of that subdivision,
Yeah.
including neighbor complaints.
Okay.
Neighbors do have a right to be heard
Yeah.
under the approving officer's processes.
Yeah,
It's not a hearing per se. Sometimes it can be, it depends, there's some discretion on the part of the
But is
approving
it a
officer.
skill?
But the approving officer will seek out even.
it's a consideration. though.
Information and feedback from neighbors with respect to applications for
Okay.
subdivision.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair to say that probably most people, once settled, want to pull up the drawbridge and don't want development close to them. So the approving officer's job is difficult to accommodate those sentiments. Okay, so, but let's not get ahead of ourselves on the TUPs, because that's in and of its own piece. Let's nail this down, because the TUPs are predicated on this and not the other way around, right?
The TUPs are included as a triggering event for a natural hazard assessment under this proposal.
It's in here, yes, and that is as a result, including just
As a
first and
result
second
of
reading.
legal advice that we'll discuss later.
Yeah, okay, so just so to stick on this policy, not a policy, this is a bylaw to amend the OCP.
But bylaws themselves are often basically pieces of policy. A bylaw is council's policy regarding a particular
certainly
matter,
this
especially
encapsulates
the
policy.
OCP.
So just, the process will be that, so what was this July 4th date? I'm looking on page 59 now.
So that was the date on which staff sent out letters with respect to, for instance, to Squamish Nation regarding whether or not they, wanted to consult with respect to this.
But that was to do with the DPAs and DPs. This is an entirely different kettle of
It's an
fish.
amendment of the OCP.
But we have to tell them that it's completely different to what we asked them.
It's not completely different, but yes, they need to be advised that it has changed in nature from development plans.
Okay, so that will
to-
happen some more. That, we'll have to do that again, I suppose.
Yeah, I'll certainly let them know.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Okay.
actually, for bringing that to my attention.
Does that not open up the public process?
Well, it's an OCP amendment, so there's going to be a hearing. But that's all being discussed. The public hearing is proposed for July 10th. So now, why landscape? Why is the piece printed in landscape?
That's the way the document came out. It was easier to work with and it evolved into that. So
Okay,
I
but
tried
it's
to.
going to be turned around, right?
No, not necessarily.
What?
Well, actually, if it was to be consistent with the rest of the OCP, it would be like a column down the middle, two thin columns,
Yes.
and that would be
Yeah,
extremely
that's right.
difficult to do.
I remember that.
I don't plan to do that.
Well, I wouldn't suggest 2 columns, but it's a very long thing to read. But okay, that's just
It'll be the same amount of reading material if it's portrait versus.
yeah, but it's a longer
landscape.
line to read at a time. And what's the Schedule A? Isn't this, why is it a schedule? Isn't it just another section?
It's a schedule to the bylaw. So this will be incorporated into a consolidated OCP as section 10.0.
Because the bylaw, the amendment bylaw 525, I don't see mention of Schedule A anywhere.
Yeah, 2B. Content of which
Okay,
is
fine.
contained in
Okay,
Schedule
right,
A.
okay, got it. So, Schedule A is section 10, not the other way around, section 10.
Schedule A will become section 10 of the consolidated OCP.
And will it say Schedule A in the OCP?
I haven't got that far.
Okay, but this is for the bylaw. So this is the schedule to the bylaw, but the OCP won't say, okay, got it. Okay, now I got it. Thanks. I mean, this is pretty complex, right? I want to make sure it's readable as possible. Fred, go for it.
Along that line, one suggestion I might have is to do with the definitions. I found it was a little difficult reading now and then because sometimes things are explained in line or sometimes as a footnote, and there are definitions as well. And I was just wondering if we could put all the definitions, explanations, and acronyms in the definitions so that a reader who's not skilled at this memory could flip back easily and find out, oh, I know what an FOS it means now. Or like ALRP, oh, what was that? I saw that as a footnote somewhere here.
Right.
And I see that how you've treated it in the text is you've capitalized it. Can we instead do something like bolding it or underlining it or all capsing it or something? Like we have done in other bylaws, recent bylaws. I think we did it in italics maybe?
Yeah, I could do.
When you use italics though
those.
sometimes. I think what works is small caps.
I don't think we have any other bylaws that use small caps
No.
for definitions.
What did we do the last time we did this?
We have some bylaws that have, well, historically, myself, personally, I've always just gone with capitalized first
Capitalization.
letter.
But as
that's
Fred
all.
says, that's sometimes hard to follow.
And other times, we've got bylaws that have bold, and we have bylaws that have italics. So,
Well, let's think that through, because I'll point out the community charter, for example, doesn't capitalize anything. So you don't even know that you're reading a definition,
that's correct.
and it's quite hard to read. But when I see a capitalized term here, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a defined term. Like Village of Lions Bay is capitalized. Or maybe that is a defined term. Yeah, but I'm with Fred there. I'd something.
Well, capital M municipality is defined.
Yeah, well, there you go. But that also might look like somebody just likes the use of capitals.
One other question I've got, in the charts and everything that came from the EPA thing, they still list the DPAs.
Yeah.
And I wonder if we should change, can we change it to NAHA?
Yeah,
I think we should.
that request was sort of put out there for Pierre, who can take care of that. But I wanted to see where this goes first.
Okay.
And Photoshop 9 can do it as well. We certainly don't want DPA appearing in the final version. That'll look like we're trying to pull a fast one.
Or is this something Pierre would have to do because it's more proprietary in his charts or his maps?
Yeah, I would. Well,
It's our data.
It is,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I think we own it, right? We pay for it. Norm, I can tell from the brainwaves over there that you're skeptical.
The silence is actually deafening.
Yeah.
Enlighten us.
There's two things that are throwing me off. One of them is that we seem to react every time Pierre Freely says something, which I don't like.
We're not taking his advice.
Well, we put it in our paperwork that he's not supporting in some shape or form the development that we've talked about. I don't know why his opinion weighs so heavily on everything we do.
Okay, well,
So
If
that's
I
my
could-
comment.
yeah,
I'm not asking for.
okay.
The second piece is that I'm not comfortable with. I'm still not comfortable including these maps in our actual bylaws. I mean, it's one thing to refer to a report, and it's another thing to enshrine these as total fact. So, we're calling on a qualified professional to do his job, yet we're actually providing more than just guidance with this. So I don't know if this is appropriate. Is this appropriate to put this in a bylaw?
Yep,
Okay.
it's required under the.
Yeah, I think maps are very, but to alleviate that thing, the current thing is if you fall on this side of the line, you need to jump through these hoops and that area. Can those lines be made fuzzy on the map?
No, there's a corresponding Excel spreadsheet that goes with every lot on that map.
And so if some of a lot is in the area, then the whole lot is,
Mhm.
so that the line follows the property line. So, and that answers, I think, a question, I think you had that question, Ron. People said, well, who's to say my property's on this or that side of the
Well,
line?
so it's actually one of the complainants on this was Norm's neighbor across the street. Well, the line just ends at her property and Norm skates. Well,
The point is, the line is somewhat arbitrary,
yeah,
and if it turns out there's nothing to worry about, then there's nothing. Then
yeah.
the fact that you are on that side of the line, it does mean that you have to pay somebody, whereas Norm didn't have to pay somebody for at least that one. That you're not in that particular zone. But I think everybody will have to get a qualified professional, just like they do today, a geotech assessment. Everybody's in one such zone or another, right?
Pretty much.
The only part of the village is in the Ocean Rise one, obviously.
So
So-
Norm, back to you, there's a silent one here. So you had the 2 points, one when you were referring to, just made your point. The other one, Peter vetoed the map piece. Anything else?
Sure, and just throwing in the short-term rentals, this temporary use permit now triggers a development permit application.
Well, we'll talk about that
Or-
in the section, but it's not a DPA, a natural hazard assessment. But we'll talk about
It
that.
requires natural hazard assessment now, so no one's gonna apply for that.
So that's something
That
that
shuts
we're
the
gonna,
door on
that we're
temporary
gonna
use
talk about
permits.
in closed?
But it's listed, it's in here,
Yeah, because it needs to be.
okay.
Yeah, that's the house.
Just like I
keeps-
can't really
So-
speak to the.
Okay, so how do we adopt this without talking about that?
well, we can defer it. So I had the same question because we
Yeah.
need to talk about a piece. Although I think the TUP piece is subsidiary to this piece. So we don't have to accommodate the TUP piece that is mentioned in here in the bylaw amendment.
Mhm.
If the TUP requirement goes away, that doesn't change the bylaw, does it? Do you remember where the TUP section was again? 78, I think.
It's in the yellow part.
No, the mention in the bylaw itself.
Oh, it's under the
Oh, it's just,
definition
it's buried
of
in
new
it.
development.
It's under the definition of new development, yeah.
But I think,
63.
to Norm's point and to yours, Carl, should we choose to, we can do the two and make an amendment before we go to the third, after we've got our in-camera on the two points.
Would that work?
Yeah, you could.
But this is the version that would go to public hearing, so we want to get it relatively good.
Yeah, but you could.
You can have one more meeting before it goes to public, you
Well-
can have the July the 4th meeting.
Not if we're going to go to public hearing July 10th. But my suggestion would be discuss this to the point where you're comfortable, and then leave that. But don't give it 2 readings.
Just
go
table
to
it.
closed. When you come out of closed,
Then
then
report out.
Then decide. At that point, give it 2 readings with or without that provision.
Okay, it's a little bit chicken and egg, but I don't think it is actually. I think it's.
Okay, well, let's see what goes. I mean, just in terms of, for me, if we didn't have the closed, I would be fine with the recommendation here, but I understand the closed piece, so.
Okay, so to put this piece to bed, what else do we have on the proposition that we now go to a natural hazard assessment requirement for new development, and we will clean up. We will say yes or no on certain aspects of what comprises new development, but just for everybody's reminder, it's obvious new development when you're building a new house. It's subdivision. Peter and I went round and round and round on this one. Maybe you just want to touch on that, Peter. Why is subdivision new development?
Because you have to be able to say as a municipality that if you're going to create parcels that can be bought and sold, that the land is actually capable of being used for the use intended. Otherwise, you're just selling swampland in Florida, basically.
Maybe that's what you want to buy. Alligator farm. Okay, so the point is that by allowing a subdivision, we are saying it's in an RS1 zone. We are saying that your new piece of land is suitable for RS1, and we have the natural hazard assessment to prove it.
Right.
Yeah.
With or without conditions.
With or without conditions. So that's why on that. So subdivision, we will discuss the TUP being considered new development, because it is a temporary change in zone from some kind of residential, whether it's multifamily or single family, but it's now commercial-ish. Yeah. So we'll discuss that in closed, because that pertains to legal advice. So land, legal, and labor is a closed discussion. Anything else on this guy? Okay, so let's have a motion then to table it. If table's the word I'm looking for, is it?
You can, table it until after closed.
Table
Table it until we'll come back to it. And a second on that one? And any further discussion? Right, all in favour of tabling, and opposed, that carries. Okay. Good. Now, I believe we're going on to the traffic bylaw adoption. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have to we'll have to revisit all of the recommendations, all 5 of the recommendations under 10A when we get back to it. So can I have a motion for adoption on this one? This has been given first, second, and third reading previously. Thanks, and that's a second. Any discussion? All in favour? Opposed and carried. Good, thank you. And then now to the zoning bylaw amendment. This is on page 125, to do with tightening up the definition on cannabis. Previously, Peter, we had, it's all in the report, and you've read the report, so I don't need to belabor the point. This is pending future potential action once we understand where the province is going, right? Because I believe it's council's intention that we don't intend to support any form of public cannabis use, retail, distribution, purchase,
Warehousing.
advertising, warehousing, etc., etc. For example, we may need to amend our no smoking provisions in the beach because somebody say, I'm not smoking, I'm toking. Or, and for that matter, I'm vaping, not smoking. So, but that is pending once we know what's going on because it's too early to say. So all this is doing is tightening up what we can. Is that fair to say?
Yep.
Okay. So you're asking for a first and second reading because this is zoning bylaw, one of the few bylaws that has to go to public hearing. But we're going to be doing it all in a one-stop shop in the public hearing for the OCP amendment, correct?
No, the recommendation is that this public hearing be held at 6:30 on July 3rd, immediately prior to the next council meeting. That both of these bylaws have their own separate public hearings at 6:30, July 3rd.
Okay. I think we all understand around the table this is a minor, almost administrative amendment, but it is to a piece of legislation that requires public hearing.
And so, just on that point, there is provision in the community charter and in the local government act, rather, whereby you don't necessarily have to have a public hearing for a bylaw which is consistent with the OCP. So my question to planning consultant was whether we really need to have a public hearing on these. But especially on the cannabis one, he recommended that you go through the motions.
Is it consistent with the OCP?
Well, that gets into a whole nother debate on is not inconsistent the same thing as consistent? And that's a whole esoteric
No,
debate
it's not.
that we're not going to have. So
The fact that we didn't say in the thing that we're not going to run a space program of our own doesn't mean that we should.
I think this is gonna probably, I think Peter's at the point, we have to give the opportunity for it. You can put a paragraph, or Peter can, in the
Oh,
village
we can
update,
promote it,
and
yeah,
then
sure.
promote it, and then I'll take bets if more than two people don't come.
Okay, so is everybody clear on what we're doing? So we're going to give first and second, then we're going to go to this quasi-private public hearing.
not quasi-private, it'd be a council meeting.
Yeah.
Maybe
But I mean, it's not going to be,
Private in any way, shape, or form.
it is public, but it's almost administrative. So everybody good on that one?
Motion?
Thank you. And a second? Any further discussion? This is first and second reading. All in favor? Opposed and carried. Okay, and then same again for the housekeeping piece that automatically designates road closure as RS1 until further designation. This saves us from a public hearing every time we do this. I don't know how many more road closure opportunities we have, but let's.
Might as well take care of this while we're at it.
Because this one, the Calvin Grove one I'm pointing at, that would fall under this.
Yes.
Okay. So
Exactly.
so
Speeds up the process.
we may as well do it now. Okay. So everybody know what we're talking about? It's just
Motion?
it's doing it in an omnibus blanket sense rather than one by one by one. Thanks for the motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, just so we know what we're doing here. First and second reading on this one. This will then go to public hearing, same council meeting, on automatically designating sale of municipal land, specifically road closure, or any municipal land.
No, it's just parcels created by way of road closure
Okay.
bylaw.
Okay, fine. Will automatically be designated residential single family one. We only have one kind. Okay, so I'll call the question. All in favour and opposed? That carries. Okay. Where are we?
Correspondence.
What's that?
Correspondence.
Oh, correspondence.
135.
Okay, Ron, you want to do this?
I didn't think we'd ever see it by 9 o'clock, but
Okay, can I just ask for a quick recess? I just have to understand what my child is up to.
2 minutes. Okay.
Thanks, would you mind?
Favor? That's good, thanks.
Okay, resuming council meeting at 9:08. Correspondence, Ron.
Thank you. G1, letter from the PAMR. And this is the bilateral agreement between the feds and the Prov. From where I'm sitting, there's no response, but
Well, hang
perhaps
on.
there, and
I don't know how to word this, but somehow I would like the MP to answer the question, are there any plan controls to allow small communities to actually hire contractors to do the work? Because costs have been excessive and contractors large enough to do the necessary works are drawn off by the big ticket communities.
well, why don't you ask her on Canada Day?
I think we should write to her
It's not
before
coming.
that. I like your text.
Well, I'd like to know the answer because it just seems like they throw the money out into the country and it's a free-for-all, and whoever gets the most money
Sucked up
attracts
by
the big
that, yeah.
contractors.
Well, we're dealing with something to do with that in closed, so perhaps we'll make a resolution on how we're going to approach our response to this letter then. But I will point out, correct me if I'm wrong now, there is no clean water, wastewater phase 2. This is the next phase, against which we would apply for our Bayview project.
Or something else.
Or an expansion or the
Next
missing
phase. Missing pieces.
jigsaw piece puzzles, or both. Okay.
No, only one this time. You can only apply for one.
So,
So
allowing for
you
your-
know the terms on this now. You
allowing for your child standing there with his hat in his hand, waiting for coins to hit the bottom so he can get a ride to Horseshoe Bay. I suggest that we NR this one and take it into close for the response.
Yep.
UBCM, which is the vote for the next meeting, no response. This, of course, is the lower driving speed, and we know who'll be pushing that one.
Yes.
Okay, nothing there. Changes to Strata Property Act, page 4. Interesting. This is from New Westminster, and I think for Mayor Burr to think about. Does the mayor have their own stationery? Because it looks kind of cool on page 139.
Of course he does.
I
It's
mean-
probably his own coat of arms.
Well, I'm kind of thinking that. I mean, it's a good little.
It is the
sign.
oldest municipality
There
in
you
British
go.
Columbia. But
So anyhow, NR in that one. Think about the letterhead though. G4, proposed regional DCC for transportation, that's on page 155 160. The thread of it is DCCs for all development. And Metro going to, a piece of it going to TransLink. And I noticed that the circulation didn't include Belcarra, being this baby communities.
yeah, I don't know why.
And I don't know why. But I mean, this is kind of a, Mayor, I'll defer to you on this one.
Well, so the backstory on this one is not insignificant, and it was brought up by me actually at the Mayor's Council meeting where this first was mooted that as one of the many nickel and dime requirements to fund the regional contribution to the Phase 2 plan, which needed to raise $8 billion, which the feds were funding to the tune of something, and the province something else. The plan was to put an extra DCC, which requires provincial legislation, but if there was going to be consensus, they're only too happy for us to tax our own communities. The province loves that. So the plan was that the DCCs would only apply to developments of over 4 units. There was a suggestion at the beginning that it would be scaled according to distance from mass transit or essentially from SkyTrain. So there'd be a formula based on how much you were likely to benefit from investment in transit, how much DCC you should pay. Well, that idea was quickly dropped. It was the recommendation that came out from the experts was that it was going to be a flat rate DCC across the whole region. And then at the very last minute, in a bait and switch maneuver, the four unit development was dropped. This DCC will apply to every development in Metro. Certainly the proposed development at Kelvin Grove, but even single family will now have to pay a DCC. to TransLink. John McEwen got his hand up before I did, so he said this piece in the last Mayor's Council meeting. We were incensed because essentially, I mean, in his particular case, it's really going to screw us over. Anmore has it worse than we do because their lots are huge. So their servicing requirements, you know, they have to lay a half a kilometre of pipe to service a new lot. But that's the backstory.
Well, it's a good story, and you know, not to repeat about the heinous yoke of taxation from foreign parties, but I mean, which TransLink substantially is, because for what we're paying, it's pretty nominal service. So I don't know where you want to go with this one, because I don't disagree with what he's proposing, but I mean, it's just kind of a letter thrown up in the air and very dinky and.
Yeah, there's no ask, there's no call to action. So
Well, it actually encourages you to consider the potential impacts and join us in advocating, so I presume you're doing that.
doing that.
Done. And are then? Good. The next one, G5. I find it how Minister Robinson, you know, it's like how to get an invitation to a party at 101. You know, if you want to see me, here's the steps you do it. So there you go. So I'm
Well,
gonna
I'll also just tell you that she refuses to meet with local communities on the grounds that they are local, so she only likes to meet with out-of-town people who don't get a chance to see her.
Well, okay then.
So guess which community, well, we actually did meet with her on something else, a specific project, but yeah, I've never met her for the Lions Bay meet and greet.
I'm going to leave it for the two of you to beg and grovel. Which, of course, then brings it to, I mean, if she's so attainable, then Mr. Horgan, he's up to invitation 201.
Yeah,
Just ring me, okay? So no response on that one.
I don't intend, just if I am going to UBCM to at least to promote our average speed over distance advocacy, but I don't intend to meet with any of these people because it's not worth the paper it's written on. You saw my letter to the minister reminding her of her
Yes.
promises at the last one.
Okay, and then so done with our internal stuff. So the resident things are two pieces and they're both parking related, so I need council to bring your focus in on this one. On the first one, which is page 159 of 160, the writer is on the tree committee and he's got my email address and not anybody else's, so that's where it came. So just to synthesize this, and I'm going to defer to everybody's view in a second. So the first paragraph, he's basically stating fact, fine.
Well, he's not. There's no resident only sign. It's permit required. Totally changes the impact.
Okay, well, I you know, it's not one of the streets I frequent, so.
Yeah, we have no resident only signs anymore. Or
Okay.
if they do, they're coming down very
Permit
soon.
only, fine, so technicality, but you get the idea. So the second one is that, you know, it's a personal issue about switching his plates basically, and how can he make himself whole by switching plates? Okay, fair enough question.
Can you do that?
Well, he cancels his insurance and
Oh, he cancels it.
moves
Oh,
it back
okay.
and forth, yeah. So, okay, I get that. So that means he's not gonna get, 2 decals unless he does what theoretically you did and muck yours up and come and get another one.
No, I actually mucked it up.
Well, I know you did, but I was being generous.
Yeah.
So he says, okay, I mucked mine up and here's the shreds.
Oh, it does it every 6 months, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, he could do that.
Well, I'm trying to be creative here.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
okay. Anyhow, bottom line here is that, okay, so it's a unique situation. You can get a replacement, so that's not a big deal. I don't think he has to purchase it either, does he?
Well, anything more than 2.
He doesn't state whether he drives the car or the truck between May and September. So if he switches over in October, it won't matter because no permit is required.
Well, he's in Mexico. I shouldn't say that, but there we go. Let's say
He says
that-
so. In writing.
Let's imagine when people would normally go for an extended period, let's use the term snowbird, if you kind of got the idea.
So it doesn't need a permit then.
You know, my bottom line here is I'm proposing that Peter give him a call.
Or I can write to him, but yeah, it's Peter's, yeah, probably more, yeah, I mean,
Not you.
yeah, I don't actually know what he's asking. Remove the residents only sign? No. Extra permits?
He's-
No.
He's probably just happy to have 5 minutes of Peter's
Extra
time face to
permits for
face.
free, though, that you can purchase.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But the point is, as Peter says, he doesn't actually need a
So,
permit.
Just everybody nod? Peter, you got it. Thank you. I think I without everybody nodding, go ahead, Chief.
Well done.
Okay, then we get to the other one, which was the on-table item, which, again, this family has everybody's address, but I happened to be at their place on Sunday, and this came up because I was standing there more than, and the discussion took place as a piece of that. So the thread of it, this using the pictures as the best diagram here, is that if we look at what I guess is the third picture, which is this one. So there, this is right at the trailhead at the top of Ocean View. Not very limited hiker traffic compared to the other side. So the two signs, the main piece is permit parking May to September, which would imply either previously obtained permits or a resident. And then it's got the no parking on either side, on the top side because that's cul-de-sac, and on the bottom side it's no parking down for a considerable length of Ocean View Road. So as I was there with the resident, what should happen but a bunch of hikers. Saturday, 10 o'clock, there they are with their little packs. They've got no ability to go get a temporary permit because they didn't.
Nor are they qualified to get one.
Well, yes,
Permits are for residents.
permits are for residents,
SAR
but
staff.
we're a welcoming community. So the issue here is that for the small amount of traffic here, which is what the writer is proposing, is that in this large going down from where the permit parking is, it just happens to be right adjacent to my property and my neighbor's property, is a spot that is frequently used for events at the top of the street, for casual hikers and all the rest of that stuff. And I've plowed some of the trees back, so it's nicely, most of the cars are off the road. So the suggestion is that one of the parking arrows is removed to allow people to park. And I would guess between the 6 or 7 spots that are created there, it would take care of all sorts of transient hikers.
But the whole idea is that visitors don't park here.
Issue here, Carl, is I believe in the case of these two hikers that we saw, is they went down the hill, somewhere down the hill, where they're more exposed and on the road, and tried to hide in plain sight. So the real issue is, do we want any hikers that are not from the village or not friends of family that live in the area to do that? And I'm going to suggest that we don't mind hikers and that we should allow them to be in place. So I'm representing, I'm a stakeholder because I'm fine with using.
Well, I don't think we're going to
adjacent-
debate parking policy now. This is staff.
Where I was going with the recommendation actually is that unless staff would have a yay, nay, or what they want to do, but I was going to allow or suggest that the CAO might want to think about the recommendation, which of mine is to open this up, or council can debate it or not, whatever you want to do. I mean, I'm just laying the information out here. I mean, the key pieces are we welcoming or not for the few hikers that go?
The idea here is to keep these spaces available for residents.
Couldn't possibly ever see 3 residents there parking unless they had a flat tire.
Or visiting. Or
We've all got those in the mail where we can give them to people who make a park.
I'm willing to accept Ron's recommendation on this one because he's right there.
Well,
It's his neighborhood.
Well,
And-
we'd have to ask the other neighbors what they felt.
Oh, Mr. Barmier lives with
Well, it's
the beer
interesting
can
that you bring
throwaway.
this up because Saturday morning I walked Memphis up the road. Memphis is my dog, and I had a couple. I guess they turned around at the top of the road, surprised to read that the wording on the sign had changed. It caught them off guard. They said, "Well, we like going up to unnecessary. Where do we park now?" And I said, "Geez, I actually don't have an answer for you." I didn't realize the signs had already changed. But the feeling that I got, I didn't like, because I felt like I was basically telling people to go away. And it's not what I want to be doing, personally. I like that people are coming up here and enjoying the hike.
Well, I'll just remind us all that the reason that we try to restrict hiker parking is because of the vehement complaints we were receiving. Hikers all over the road.
I don't disagree, but I mean, in there you've got two locals here and a third to care, and I'm not suggesting this goes to a vote, but if Peter wants to take this up and think about it as a unique situation where we're welcoming for 6 spots where I've identified where they could be.
Well, it's easy to do. You just take down the permit
Take
required
down
sign.
the, well, no, or, no, just the arrow, the one arrow. So it allows them to basically park there.
I think what I'm,
No,
No.
below.
what I'm hearing is that the area that currently now says permit required May to September provides sufficient parking spaces for guests of any residents that live at the top of this street.
Yes.
And that the area below that, which
That one.
now says can't park there
That's
because
right.
the arrow from the top could be opened up to people because the residents in that section of street don't need
Don't
it.
mind.
They don't mind, they don't need it. They'd rather see people parking safely in that spot rather than finding a perhaps unsafe spot further down the road.
Does it work for you?
That's what I'm hearing.
Well, as long as it's safe to park there.
You could just move the no parking sign down a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be tweaks all the time, right?
Well,
I mean,
that's why I'm bringing it forward, Carl.
I-
It's a maiden, it just happens to be Norm in my backyard here, and so, I mean, I'm fine, and I think, when we go to our Thursday first summer cocktail party, I mean, pretty sure we're gonna hear about yes or no.
Well, yeah, maybe that would be a good time to ask. The whole idea is to reserve that parking area for residents and guests. But I'm fine with moving the no parking sign further
It's a
down.
unique local little tweak.
Yeah, well, they all are going to be. Okay, so I think you guys got enough. You can work as you're tweaking. There's going to be multiple tweaks. I've had multiple
I'll even take
requests.
the sign down for you, man. I'll even take the sign down
Oh,
for
don't
you.
do that.
Don't do that, no.
Oh.
No, Next thing you'll be
It's a
climbing,
bylaw infraction.
next thing you'll be climbing power poles.
Be careful.
No.
Okay, thank you, so Peter, if you could do
You'll get a
that.
letter.
That was,
I will
that was
say
a joke.
The best way
If
to
it would be
invite
fine,
people
I'll respond
to
to the
park in their
applicant that you
parking
got it,
spots is
and
by telling them
we're
they can't do
positive,
it.
thank you.
Right?
No, you'll get a letter, badly spelled and poorly laid out.
Your kid, he's got $1.50 so far.
No, he's still working.
Oh,
He didn't know if he was working till 9 or 10. It looks like it's 10. Which is a bit late for a 14-year-old, mind you. Okay, so a motion to receive correspondence and action as discussed, and a second on that. All in favor, opposed, carried. And on we go to new business. There is none. Public questions and comments? Are you enjoying yourselves? Okay. Okay, now we need a motion to close the council meeting under 91E, I, J, K, and 92B, please. There's a motion and a second, and any discussion? All in favor, opposed, carried. Let's proceed straight away onto this guy. Okay, we're returning from a closed meeting with one item to report out, and that is that the community signage makeover Phase 1 project was awarded to Philip Shore, and good things are expected to happen there. And now we will return to the tabled item, which was first and second reading on the zoning bylaw amendment number, what, Peter? 548, with one small change.
Sorry, no, not
No?
zoning bylaw, no, we're talking about the, bylaw 525, the OCP amendment.
OCP amendment, sorry, beg your pardon.
And so
10A.
the amendment to what you have before you was at page 76, section 10.1.8, called council reconsideration, and following wording was to be added, subject to the municipality's rights with respect to requiring a detailed assessment or peer review, comma, and then the balance of the paragraph flows. And that was the only amendment, I believe, that we were making to
Okay,
the
fine.
bylaw.
So, certain aspects of this amendment were discussed in closed, and pending reports that are anticipated to come from legal will get reported out or not, as the case may be, if they result in any changes. But we're now asking for first and second reading on this amendment prior to going to public hearing. Can I have a motion and a second? Any discussion? Further discussion? All in favour? And opposed? That carries. Okay, good. And now I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Oh, no. Sorry, if you turn to page 53 of your package,
Sorry.
there are 5 recommended
Oh yes. Okay.
resolutions.
Okay. So let's just knock those off one by one. Okay. So the first is that the request for decision, which is the report, be received. Can I have a motion and a second? All in favour of receipt and opposed? That carries. And then that the table of natural hazard assessment area guidelines appended as attachment A be used as a communication tool. That's the table, right, Peter?
Yeah, on page 58.
You need that as a resolution? It's just sort of a marching orders, fine. Motion on that one? Second? Discussion? All in favour? Opposed and carried. And that the, we did 3, sorry, so we'll go on to 4. That we deem the amendment consistent with the 5-year financial plan and the GVRD Integrated Solid Waste and Resource Management Plan. We've been advised by staff that that is the case. Any further advice? Caveats? Things we wish we would know then that we should know now?
Hope not.
Okay. So I'll ask for a motion. There's one and a second. Any discussion? All in favour? Opposed? Carried. And that a public hearing be scheduled for 7 p.m. on Tuesday, July 10th. That's a motion and a second. Fred, you look.
What was it, July 10th?
Yeah, this is the real public hearing,
Oh, right.
not the
Okay.
the pre-council meeting one. This is
That's right.
yeah, this is a full-on communication suite rented from Communications R Us. Look at him, he's broken into a sweat. Yeah, you wouldn't buy me a projector.
Motion?
Thank you. Second. All in favour and opposed? That carries. And now, are we done? Motion to adjourn. Second. All in favour? Opposed? Carried.